Welcome to this webinar on the risks of labor rights and occupational safety and health violations in the electronics industry in Vietnam. My name is Björn Clausen. I'm Director of Electronics Watch, but today we are really glad to have Kim Tu Ha, who is Managing Director of the Center for Development and Integration in Vietnam, as today's presenter. So, a few introductory words. You will have noticed that you are all on mute for this webinar, but we do encourage you to participate, which you can do by sending questions in the chat box to Martina or to Martina Hooper. She will show up in the chat box menu. Please think about questions that you may want to ask the presenter during the presentation. Send the questions to Martina in the chat, and then after the presentation, we have time for questions and answers. And a reminder also that this webinar is being recorded. So a few introductory words first. Electronics Watch is an independent monitoring organization that helps public sector buyers to work together and collaborate with civil society monitors in production regions to protect the rights of workers in their electronic supply chains. We are a network of affiliated public sector buyers, 329 at this moment, who share the cost of monitoring their electronic supply chains and coordinate engagement with companies to ensure that there are improvements in working conditions in these supply chains through Electronics Watch. And in Vietnam, our monitoring partner is Kim Tu Ha's organization, the Center for Development and Integration. This map, just to make it more accurate, is actually missing one area of monitoring, a more recent area, which is Poland, which also should be colored green here. All the green areas are areas where we have monitoring partners where we conduct monitoring. The blue areas are areas where our public sector affiliates are located. Today's presentation is part of a series on socially responsible public procurement webinars, and recordings of past webinars you'll find on our website. They include webinars on knowing and showing your supply chain, i.e. about supply chain transparency. They include webinars on responsible mining, about the risk of suicide in the electronics industry in China, and the link between the suicide and the employment conditions there. They include webinars on promoting safe working conditions in public procurement supply chains, about migrant worker recruitment issues in Malaysia, and about how we can use the public procurement process to strengthen worker voices in public procurement supply chains. Coming up is our annual conference in Barcelona on December 4th. This is a fairly unique conference in that it brings together leading practitioners of socially responsible public procurement throughout Europe with labor rights monitoring partners in electronics production regions globally. We do encourage you to register for this conference and to attend the conference. And you do that by first sending an email to Martina Hooper, and you have her email address at the bottom of the screen here. She will then send you a link so that you can get registered. So over to today's presentation. Today's presentation is based on a regional risk assessment conducted by the Center for Development and Integration for Electronics Watch. This regional risk assessment is available on the Electronics Watch website. It is intended to guide our affiliates, that is public sector buyer engagement with suppliers with regard to the labor rights issues and occupational safety and health issues that they may want to discuss with suppliers. These issues, what are the key issues that they should in Vietnam on labor rights and occupational health, safety and health. So today's presenter, we're so glad to have Kim Tu Ha. She is Managing Director and Research Team Member of the Center for Development and Integration. She has conducted extensive research on development issues, including research on migrant workers in Vietnam. And she has edited many training manuals and worked as the trainer or co-trainer or developed training courses on labor regulations, worker rights, and life skills for workers. Ha has a master's degree of linguistics, a Bachelor of Arts in Education, and a Bachelor of Arts in English from Hanoi National University. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kim, to Ha. Or can you hear us, and can we hear you, Ha?
Yes, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
And then I'm going to, yes. Then I'm going to turn it over to your presentation here as well. Let's see. There we go.
Okay. Thank you, Bjorn and Martina, for organizing this webinar. And thanks other participants who are interested in this webinar. Firstly, I would like to introduce a little bit about CDI, the Center for Development and Integration. As a labor NGO in Vietnam, we have started our activity to support migrant workers in electronics factories since 2011. Actually, at that time, we started our intervention in Bắc Ninh province with a supply chain of Samsung there. And then in 2017, we start our monitoring activities in other provinces as well. This regional risk assessment was combined by our interviews with workers in different provinces, actually in 3 provinces, namely Bắc Ninh, Đồng Nai, and Hải Phòng, which are among the major production areas in Vietnam of electronic industries in Vietnam. And we focus on the working condition and the access to the core labor standard of the worker, the core labor rights of the workers. This is not only a literature review. It was a combination and consolidation from the input from the workers, and also our review of available reports of the industries. Actually, there are very few available report and research about electronics industry in Vietnam. And we also consult with other actors like the auditors, the trade union, and also the government officers to explore the characteristic of the industry. The limitation of this research is that we cannot have the comprehensive quantitative research for the whole industry in the countries, but it's really highlight the input, the response from the workers. We have, based on our surveys, we have conducted more than 400 interviews with the workers in 2017 in Bắc Ninh province, in 2018 in Đồng Nai and Hải Phòng. And also we compare and consolidate the input from other reports conducted by IPAN and CGFED in Vietnam, and also other research conducted by Ms. Đỗ Quỳnh Chi and Frederick Abel-Stephen. So based on this research and consultation, we have come up with the key results based on the code of conduct of electronic work. Firstly, I will give you an overview of the electronics industry in Vietnam. Actually, the industry is not new. It has started. It started since the 60s to 70s of the last centuries, but actually it started to grow fast in 2000, from 2000, and now. And since 2017, it became the export champion of the countries. And it attracts a large workforce in Vietnam. With only more than 1,000 electronics company, it employing more than 500,000 of workers. And most of them are domestic migrant workers. And many of them, from 70 to 80% of the workers are female workers. And they rent the house to live and work in a location around Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Next slide, please. You can see here from the map the distribution of electronic brands by province in Vietnam. And you can see two major production regions, one in the north and one in the south. And in the north, there are three provinces which highlight productions factory. They are Bắc Ninh, Thái Nguyên, and Hải Phòng. In the south, it is Ho Chi Minh City, Dong Nai, and Bình Dương province. And there are some difference between the two hubs of production. In the north, there are more factories working and producing mobile phones and phone parts. But in the south, there are more factories producing electrical products and parts like TVs and other electrical products used in a family. Next slide. And every year, according to the General Statistic Office, electronics always the export champion since 2017 until now. It has taken over the first position of the textile and footwear industry in Vietnam. Next, please. And the key export market of mobile phones and parts from Vietnam, the largest market is EU. You can see the EU markets account nearly 28% of the total export of mobile phones and phone parts from Vietnam recently. This is the statistic for the first 4 months of last year, 2018. And until now, EU is still the largest market for exporting mobile phones from Vietnam. Next, please. Could you go next? Next, please. And you can see that in Vietnam, almost the big brands of electronics have presented here. With Samsung, Canon, Panasonic, Intel, Foxconn have developed large factories last year in Vietnam. And the highlight characteristic of the industry in Vietnam is that it is really dominated by the foreign invest enterprise in terms of the number, the productions and the employment, and also the market share. And among the top 100 biggest enterprise, 99 of them are foreign owned. And 1/3 of the electronics enterprise are foreign owned. And they account for 99% of the total export of the industry. Among the top 20 largest enterprise, the Japanese one take the first position with 11 corporations enterprise, and following by South Korea, Taiwan, and USA. And recently, I can see that these enterprise and brands have many code of conduct or initiatives to improve the compliance along the supply chain. One of the most highlights initiative is the RBA, which is now applied in the whole supply chain of Samsung in Vietnam. Next, please. So come back with the regional risk assessment. As Bjorn have just introduced to you, this was supported by Electronic Watch, and we have a team set up by CDI with a lead trainer, a lead researcher, Ms. Do Quỳnh Chi, and CDI team. We have conducted the assessment by end of 2018 and until the mid of this year, 2019, and based on the workers' surveys, the secondary data, and consultation. We follow the Electronic Watch Code of Labor Standard, and also we compare with the labor regulations according to the Vietnam labor law. The target is focused on the mobile phone making story, the phone making story. It is one limitation because we cannot reach out to other products, other factory which are producing other products, like in the south. And this is also because of the methodology used for this, for our interviews, because we use the snowball technique, and we approach the phone making workers. So we are not aiming to have very comprehensive quantitative analysis for all segments in electronic industry, but seek to identify and analyze the risks of violation in many factories which are producing phone or phone parts in Vietnam. Next slide. So the first labor standard is the employment is freely chosen. According to our analysis and consultation, most of the problem related to the forced labor in electronics industry in Vietnam is related to the overtime working, because the workers, they reported that they were being forced to work overtime in many cases for longer hours than the legal limit. And if they don't agree with the overtime working, they have to face with some threats of dismissal from the manager. And this is quite popular, and that's why, and because it go beyond the legal limit in Vietnam, therefore it's become the forced labor. Next slide, please. The second one, which we really invest time and effort to analyze and get the response from the worker, is the freedom of association and collective bargaining, how they exercise the right from in their factories. And regarding to this, I have to say that there is a key gap between the national law and the international convention. Until now, Vietnam has not ratified the convention 87 of ILO, and still the government and also the National Assembly is considering the new labor code, the labor code revision with a chapter and articles related to the freedom of association. The recent draft of the labor code allow the worker representative organization, the independent one, outside the VGCL system, the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor. But that is the draft law, and it will be passed, or will be discussed to be passed tomorrow by the National Assembly. And if it is passed, it will take some more time, maybe from 6 months to 1 year, depending on the discussion tomorrow, before it becomes effective. Therefore, the current labor code is still effective, and according to that, VGCL is still the only representative organization of workers in Vietnam. And according to the Vietnamese government commitment, they have a roadmap to ratify the ILO Convention 87 in 2023. It's the commitment and a plan from the Vietnamese government until now. So there's still a key gap between the national law and the international convention. Come back with the factory. At the factory level, it's a common practice to have managers hitting the trade unions at local level. Not only the worker, not only the research by Frederick Eberstein from FES in 2016, but also other research and interview with workers show that the trade unions at grassroots level have very limited space to work, and often because the managers are not independent, and they try to harmonize the relationship between the managers and the workers. Also, the workers are not able to practice the real and meaningful collective bargaining because the unions are not independent. In company or factory where the union are more independent and more active, the union members may face the risk of unfair treatment, like dismissal or blacklisting. Recently, there is a research by VGCL so that there are some obstacles for the trade union leaders to work really independently and actively, because despite the laws allow them and the right to act at the local level, but still they have many obstacles from the manager, factory manager. Next slide, please. For the non-discrimination in employment, we found different type of discrimination. It includes the discrimination in recruitment and employment, the discrimination in division of labor, the difference in the pay gap between the men and women workers, and also the age discrimination. And many electronics firms, they have the policy of 6-month contracts for female workers because they try to reduce their obligation with a pregnant female worker. In Vietnam, there's some advancement for the female pregnant worker, especially the one who are pregnant from the 7 months and until their baby is 12 months old. These workers can earn, can have 1 working hour reduced per day for the breastfeeding. Therefore, many electronics companies have the recruitment test. When they recruit the female worker, they have the different type of tests, like the physical test, or even they use the urine test to select the worker, the female worker who are not pregnant. Or they use the policy of 6-month contracts to reduce their obligation. For the gender pay gap, female electronics workers typically earn less than their male counterparts in own wage component. Later, when we talk about wage, I will show you the pay gap between the two, between the men and the women workers. And for the older workers, the age discrimination is very obvious, especially for the women above 35. Even the company, they have a policy, some companies have a policy of encouragement to the worker who are the older worker who are more than 30 or 35. They can get a small amount of money to quit the job. Or the company have other kinds, other ways to replace the older worker with the younger one. And the discrimination is very obvious in the industry. Next slide. For the trial labor, there are no reports, official one, on electronics company using trial labor in Vietnam. However, when we analyze the data and respond from the worker who participate in our survey in 2017 and 2018, we found 2 cases of minor workers, one age 17 and one age 15. And actually, the minor worker can work according to the law, the Vietnamese law, but they have to, the company have to follow the limitation of the working time. Maximum is 40 hours per week, and they cannot work overtime. But actually, for these 2 minor workers, they still, they report they still have to work even for the whole week, and up to 60 hours of overtime per month. Next slide, please. For the no excessive working hour standard, it's really a problem, and it's very popular. Even the officials, that's statistics from Molise, the labor inspectorate, show that more than half of the inspected company exceed the overtime limit by the Vietnamese law. And a majority of workers in our survey reported that they work overtime on a regular basis, and the overtime exceeds the legal limit throughout the years. More than 70% of the workers report that the case. So the overtime working is not an exception for the electronics worker, and it's become a very normal practice for the companies. And most workers have to work much more overtime than the legal limits. Even the worker, they want to work more because the overtime payment accounts for a large part of their total income. Although the excess working hour really impacts their family life. Next slide, please. Regarding to the safety and health, we really want to explore more on this standard because workers will report many risks to hazardous chemicals and noise at workplace, and they have many different health problems. You can see from the screen, from the presentation, that they have some different health problems related to the fainting, eyes, skin, different kind of age, the hearing abilities, backache, headache, and this especially the backache and headache is very popular to the workers, and among the workers exposed to chemical in their workplace, more than 26% had not been trained at all on the potential risk, and even for the one who had been trained, they are not satisfied with the training because they think that is not understandable and easy for them. Most of them got to know about the chemicals by reading the label of the bottles. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, you can see the hazards at workplace. Here we have the percentage of the worker exposed to the hazards, and many of them have no information about these hazards. Next slide, please. Regarding to the other standard related to the wage and benefits of the worker, we can see that the employment contract is legal, and most of the company, the electronic company, they follow the law. However, they have the way to avoid their responsibility to the worker. They refuse to sign the indefinite term contracts with the worker because according to the law, they have to sign this contract after 2 short-term contracts, but we discontinue the short-term contracts to avoid their responsibilities. In regards of the wage, electronic companies in general, they follow the regional minimum wage. They pay a little higher than the minimum wage for that areas. But still, we found some case in which workers are paid less than the minimum wage. In Bắc Ninh in 2017, we found 14 workers among more than 200 interview workers. They receive the wage lower than the minimum ones. And without the earning from overtime, most of the electronic workers, they are paid much lower than the living wage. Therefore, this is very obvious that they have to keep working overtime to get more income. Next slide. Here's the average monthly income of a normal workers in Vietnam, in electronics factories. And you can see the gender pay gap here. It clearly shows that the female workers are paid less than men in own weight component. The blue one is the basic wage, and the red one is the overtime working, and other benefit is among the top. So this is an average monthly income of electronics worker. Next slide, please. And if we compare with the living wage, you can see the line, the purple line is the living wage calculated for reason 4, which is the lowest living wage in Vietnam. And still, the if the worker, if they don't work overtime, they are paid less than that. Next, please. Next one, please. I just, because of the limited time, I just briefly share with you some of the initial results from the regional risk assessment of the electronics industry in Vietnam. We hope that this is an initial step, the first step for the brand and supplier to have further discussion. We suggest some action like the brands and supplier can discuss this risk assessment with the staff and within their supply chain. And also when they share with the contractor or the supplier, they can discuss further how to mitigate these risks and prevent the violation from along the supply chain. We also include a guide of the risk assessment table, and the company can use or refer to it when they discuss with the brand, with the suppliers and contractors, and follow up to improve the working condition and also the access to the labor rights of the worker in the industry. So this very briefly share from mine. I hope that we can clarify some point when you have more questions to me. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. We do have some questions from the participants. So the first is there any domestic gender equality or feminist movement targeting the discrimination, or female politicians championing these issues?
Excuse me, Martina.
Do you want me to? Sure, yeah, I'll repeat it. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Is there any domestic gender equality or feminist movement targeting the discrimination?
Yeah.
Or female politicians who are championing these issues, who are dealing with these issues?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I will wait, or I will answer one by one.
I think we can take this one, and then after that, okay. I'll read another.
Okay, so I can say that there's a lot of gender equality movement in Vietnam, but specifically for the worker in the industry, no, there is no specific one. But for the general movement, there are a lot of initiatives. Recently, we have a new network called GBVnet, which work on the discrimination and violence to the women, and they have many movement and initiatives in Vietnam. They okay. Also and also UN Women in Vietnam also advocate for the to reduce minimize the gender pay gap in the new labor code. But actually the labor code, even the current labor code have the regulation to and clearly show that female and male workers should not be discriminated, and they should be paid equally. But still, that is the practice, and in reality, still the gender pay gap exists.
Okay, thank you. And another question, somebody who wants to know a little bit more about the differences in the working conditions of female and male workers. For example, are there differences in the contract period and in the production line? Are they given different jobs according to gender?
Yes, there are some difference and discrimination in terms of the employment between the female and male worker. Firstly, in terms of the employment, normally it's a practice that the electronics company recruit the women for the low skill or very simple tasks, simple work. It's just rank and file. They are just rank and file worker, and very few women can work as the manager in electronics factories. And when we conduct the interviews, most of the women worker, female worker, are normal worker. They are not manager, or they are not line leader in their factories.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And the next one is there a big turnover of workers due to the short-term contracts? If so, I can imagine that it makes it difficult to monitor. How do you deal with this?
Yeah, the turnover is very high, and it also different between the first-tier supplier and the contractor or the second-tier supplier. For example, the turnover, in general, for the factory, which are the first-tier supplier, or they are the main factory of a brand. For example, Samsung factory in Vietnam, and they are producing for Samsung brand. Or LG factory, they are producing for LG brand. They are the main factory and the first tier supplier. So they, in general, they have better working conditions and the turnover is lower. The turnover there in those companies is lower. But for the factory which are producing from different brands and they are second tier supplier or they supply for many different brands, the turnover are very high. And it go with the sometimes it go with the type the season of the and following the model of the phone. For example, when the new phone is going to be launched, the company will attract a lot of workers to come and work intensively with a long working hour in 6 months before the launch. And after 6 months after the launch, not many people are interested in that model. So they reduce the workers, and many workers they have to end the contract because they only sign short-term contract, 6-month contract, maximum 1 year contract, even some seasonal or daily contract. So the turnover is very high. And I understand the question here is how we how we deal with that. You mean that how CDI is dealing with that, right?
Yeah, in order to be able to monitor these workers.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah, it's also a challenge to us. The turnover is very high, and we have to continuously work with the new workers. But also we try to remain contact with the old one by through the social network like Facebook or the mobile apps. We try to connect with them because when they quit a job in one factory, normally they try to find similar job also in electronics industry in company nearby or in close in other factory which are nearby the old one. So we try to still connect with them through Facebook and other channels.
Okay, thanks. And another question. Could you share about reproductive health problems of women workers in the electronics sector?
Yeah. I have to say that we haven't conducted an intensive research only on the health or reproductive health, but based on our survey with the worker, we record some health problem, especially reproductive health with the female worker. In 2017, many workers, more than 1/3 of the interview workers in Bắc Ninh report they have problem with their menstruation period. They have abnormal periods, and some report serious bleeding during the menstruation, which was not happened before to them. And these are the symptoms showing that they have health problem, reproductive health problem. But still, we haven't reached the step to go with the medical test with the workers.
Okay, and okay, so another question. How is trade unionism different in Vietnam from in China?
Well, it's really a difficult question. And I don't have a lot of information about the trade union in China. And we haven't conducted research about that. But this is based from some comments and sharing from trade union colleagues to me. And according to them, the trade union system in China and Vietnam is quite similar in terms of the model. yeah, it's the same model. In one system, only one representative organization, the General Confederation of Labor system, and all other local trade union have registered as affiliate with VGCL. That's the same model, but actually there's still some difference between the two. In Vietnam, the VGCL and the trade union system, they are also a member of a political system, and they are member of mass organization, coalition called Vietnam Fatherland Front, VFF, and they have, to some extent, they have more power to influence the policies and also the development model of the countries to some extent. And they also have a long history to work closely with the Communist Party in history. This year is the celebration of 90 years of establishment of the trade union in Vietnam. The 90 years, a long history of the trade union, in which they have fighting for national freedom. They have played a very important role in the development of the country. Therefore, they have some power in negotiate and engage in policy development of the country. And in terms of the worker protection, the trade union in Vietnam has been recognized in some province and in some areas that they can protect the workers and raise the voice of the workers in Vietnam, and they are recognized by the workers. This is very general comments, and I think if we want to go further in detail, we have to have more research or analyze the difference between these two trade union systems.
Sure. And we still
Martina,
have
may
more?
I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Bjorn.
Thank you so much for really informative presentation and your thoughtful answer to the last question, which I recognize is incredibly complex. But I was wondering a follow-up. You did mention, did give us some really timely news here, in that the new labor code, I think you said, was due to be adopted tomorrow. Will allow independent worker representative organizations on a factory level. I wonder if you can say a little bit more about that. Independent worker representative organizations on factories. What are your hopes? Does CDI, do you have hopes that this is going to guarantee workers better, more effective associational rights? What can change? And also, what do you think that an organization like Electronics Watch, or specifically public sector buyers who are affiliated with Electronics Watch, can do in terms of their engagement with companies to ensure that these new rights become effective and meaningful for workers?
Yes, thank you, Bjorn. Yeah, you're right. The National Assembly in Vietnam, we discussed to pass the law, the new labor code, tomorrow. That is the final session of the National Assembly regarding related to this law. And according to that, that law have paved the way for the independent worker organization. There is a chapter and also other articles state very clearly that the worker had the right to establish, to form, and to join the trade union, which are established by themselves or not by VGCL. So it means that at the grassroots level, I mean at the factories or company level, for the first time ever, the worker can form their own trade unions. However, how they can do it is still a question to us, because the law only allow the principle, general principle, and the right. And from further detail, like how they can register, what are the member fee, or how they can work together with the VGCL is still a question, and will not be very clearly decide or agreed among the National Assembly members. We will wait to see tomorrow if the Parliament or National Assembly member can agree up on the details. But I don't think that there will be very detailed or specific detail on that tomorrow. But later on, when the law come into effect next year, we hope that more detail will come. I think still it is a limit of the scale of the trade union, independent trade union, because the law does not allow the linkage between the factory union. They can only establish single one by one in one factory, and these trade union cannot connect together or come into a federation like VGCL. So still a limit to the right trade, the FOA. But CDI, we think that it's still an advantage to the worker, and also for the worker movement in general, because at least we have the right to have another voice, another representative for the workers. And for electronic watch and the public buyers, we hope that you will support more for workers to exercise the rights. We know that the law can have very beautiful words, but in order to make it really effective, and we have really active and independent trade union, the worker really needs the support from other sector, like electronic watch and other public buyer. You can have other different initiatives to build capacity for the worker, to have more training and support to the worker to exercise their rights to develop their own organization and their own representative.
Great.
And also,
well, this is
one more thing.
Yes.
Yeah. The last one, I think that electronic watch and public buyers still can keep monitoring on how the worker representative organization do it, and report on their working conditions.
And you said this law will then potentially be effective next year. Do you mean
we hope? Yeah, we hope
in January or later.
The labor code will be it will be decided. The effective date will be decided tomorrow, when the law was passed by the National Assembly. But we see that there's some chapter or some article can be delayed. The time frame for the implementation of some chapter or some article can be delayed after that. So we will know tomorrow.
Okay, stay tuned. Martina, do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap up?
I think we could maybe just fit in one more.
Okay.
Okay, so from a procurement perspective, what do you think are the key issues I should bring up with my suppliers?
The key issue among these issues, we think that the freedom of association is the first one, because still is limited by the current regulation, and the second one is the excessive working time for the workers, and the third one is the risks of safety and health. So they are the
Okay.
major issue.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're at the top of the hour right now, and we need to wrap up. First of all, a big thank you to Ha for this incredibly informative, timely, and I hope you also found it to be a very useful presentation, that we all see the opportunities that we have right now to engage with companies, engage with contractors, to public buyers, to address these key issues around overtime discrimination, health and safety, short-term contract, and freedom of association that Ha mentioned in your dialogue. And I want to remind you that Ha's presentation is based upon the regional risk assessment that she and CDI conducted for Electronics Watch, and this regional risk assessment is on the in the resource section of the Electronics Watch website. If you're an affiliate, you also have access to a risk assessment tool which suggests steps that your contractors should take to mitigate risk of these violations in Vietnam. So we encourage you to make use of this regional risk assessment and the risk assessment tool, and to communicate back to to the through your supply chain that the overtime issues, the health and safety issues, the short-term contract issues are really, discrimination issues are really important to you, and that they should help, of course, also to make sure that this new freedom of association legislation in Vietnam become effective for workers. That workers should know what their rights are, and that those rights must be respected. So with that, that's it. You're looking right now at the poster for the Electronics Watch Annual Conference in Barcelona. Again, a reminder, if you're not registered for that, please do so. The first step to getting registered is simply to send an email to Martina mhooper@electronicswatch.org, and she will then send you the registration link. So thank you again to Ha. Thank you so much to all the participants and the great questions today. And this webinar will be available also on our website, so that you can hear it again, or you can share with your colleagues the really useful information that Ha provided to us. Thank you so much again. And with that, that's the end of this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.